Hi, everybody. Welcome to the AJFF's Q&A session with award-winning director Eran Kolirin. I'm Matthew Bernstein of the Film and Media Studies Department at Emory University, and I'm delighted to welcome you to what I'm sure will be a very rich conversation. So first, Eran, congratulations on all the Ophir Awards, so richly deserved: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, 3 actors, best casting. It's incredible and so well deserved. So we're very excited that Let It Be Morning will be the official Israeli submission to the Academy Awards International Film. And we're just very, very grateful for the chance to be able to show it in our festival. If we would, just to start, tell us a bit about what attracted you to the material, this novel by famed Palestinian Israeli writer Sayed Kashua.
Well, first of all, it started when Sayed approached me and offered me to do the adaptation for his book to a film. That was not a very likely thing to happen. I mean, certainly not in the way the discourse of the world today is going. So having a Palestinian author offering me to adapt his film was, a bit of a surprise. Of course, there were all the obvious obstacles for doing that, and my natural fears in taking it. But on the other hand, I was very flattered in a way by this offer, and I felt that there was sort of a welcoming. There was something very precious happening when someone like that is opening his door for me because he liked my previous films, and so I read the book, and it really was one of those times when as soon as I read it, I had like an image in my head of what is the tone of the film that I want to do out of this book? What's the color? I had this image of it's like having the poster in your head before you film. So, which is always like a good sign, like there's something there that catches you. I think what caught me most of all was the feeling of siege. I mean, working with something that kind of extract the feeling of what it's like to be closed, both politically, but also personally, also on a personal level, on the level of your own personal walls and the walls that are surrounding your family and the walls that surround your village. And so there was something there that really took me, and in some funny way, so maybe not funny, that's not the word, but this is the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival. I think that basically Jewish heritage, and I'm not talking about Israeli heritage now, or I'm talking about the Jewish heritage, the Jewish history, has a lot of social memory of this feeling of being closed, of being a minority. So it allowed me, again, one of those absurdities that exist in this part of the world where I come from, is that in a way Sayed Kashua's book, which is really in some ways in the same line of, you can think about a lot of Jewish authors that kind of touched upon this absurdity of living when you don't have control over your life, and then one day the government or whoever can just decide you are closed, and you never know the reason, and all this kind of absurdity, which I think also in Jewish tradition has a lot of place, was something that really fascinated me. This mirroring between Palestinian identity, the Jewish identity in a way, and how it's all kind of ripples of the same stone, of the same big story, big human story. So and then then started, this long journey of making the film. And here we are, like 8 years later, and the film is out.
Yeah, the film is very particularly Palestinian in its situation, as you talk about with this siege mentality, and it relates to Israeli cultural memory and history as well.
I would say Jewish memory. I mean, the Israeli, it's something different. It's a specific, stream of. But when you talk about, this feeling that came from, I don't know, authors like Kafka, and so it's mostly, I would say, Jewish.
Point taken. Point taken. What I was going to say is it's extremely universal. It's a film. It's a story. The way you've told it, anyone can relate to it. We certainly have a better insight into it, although it's a completely different circumstance under COVID to be restricted in where we can go and what we can do. And of course, it's also very much of a piece of the band's visit, where you have characters who are in a situation where they're kind of stuck for a period of time and kind of
exactly. It was one of the things that always, in all of my films, they had this situation of someone is suddenly taken out of his life to a kind of a heterotopic, zone where he's in the twilight of existence, I would say. Yes, so it's like, and of course, this film is also about a certain twilight area of existence and twilight area of identities. And yes, I agree that you can see its relevance also in the world today with COVID. I mean, the same. And it's funny because the film was written and, we shot it before COVID, and we had like scenes in the film, like when one of the characters is started to get addicted to sanitizing liquids. Yes. So, and that was before COVID, and, it was, while we edited, I was not sure if this, scene will make it to the cut or will not make it to the cut. And then COVID came in, and it was so relevant, which was really surprising, because people said, but you wrote it before COVID? I said, yeah, that was before. but in this, situation when you have this external pressure, the feeling that you need to purify yourself somehow is, as you said, is completely humane. It's as old as Greek tragedy. We have to purify ourselves in order to have the town open again. So again, we think that humanity is changing, but in some way it does, but it always has the same patterns.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a moment where this is Aziz's new wife.
Yeah.
But it's, it is a film, like you were saying, Kafka, arbitrary, decisions being made that affect people's lives, and there's no rationale. COVID, of course, there is a rationale, at least for some Americans, why we have to be on lockdown or take care of ourselves. But it's also her attempt to assert control over a situation, and that runs through all the characters in the film, and particularly the men. There's a whole issue about masculinity that I'd want to talk to you about, and how it's envisioned in the film. But I also think it would be interesting for our audience to hear a bit about the changes you made, your process of adaptation from the novel. I haven't read the novel, but I understand Sami is he has a different occupation in the novel. Yeah. His reasons for coming to the village are different. And I wonder if you could just take us through what your thinking was about why you made these changes. I mean, and also to acknowledge the major change is that Sayed Kashua writes in Hebrew, and you decided to write a screenplay in Arabic and have the film play in Arabic. So well, first of all, it was obvious, even though Sayed writes his books in Hebrew,
They talk about, his village, which is a Palestinian village. And of course, you cannot make a film inside the Palestinian village where everyone will speak Hebrew. I mean, this may work in books, but I mean, not in a book, because in a book, you don't see the people actually talking, So it was obvious that the film should be in Arabic. There was no question about it. It's again another fun fact which kind of highlight the way identities are not as strict. The boundaries are not as strict as people want them to be. Yes, because Sayed, who is a Palestinian, writes his books in Hebrew because of, he grew up in a certain environment, and there are different reasons for this to happen. But and me, the Jew, the Israeli, had to kind of retranslate it into the Arabic, which I think is part of the big fun or the magic of this film. I mean, all those small mirroring image between the two societies. Sayed was very generous with allowing me to, do the adaptation as freely as I want to. And, I decided at a very early stage that with myself kind of made an agreement that I will be as free as I want. I mean, I will not limit myself, but I will be always faithful for the spirit of the book. And the spirit of the book as I saw it, which means the feeling of siege. And sometimes in order to translate it into cinema, you have to do a lot of changing. I mean, I know sometimes in the US they are very obsessed about how much faithful was this. I mean, but it's a bit ridiculous as I see it, because there's no need to really do copy a book into the film. I mean, because the book is already existing and everybody's a very good book, and I hope people will read it after seeing the film. But an adaptation is not a staging of a book on screen, because a screen needs other stuff. For example, the book developed in a much slower way, in a way that the guy is moving to his village because and then he lives in his village, in his childhood village, and then after a month, 3 months there, a siege started. But I don't have the time to do that in a film. I mean, and I cannot even, in production wise, I cannot make the 4-hour film. I need to extract it to the very basics, so I can go for the heart as soon as I can. So I thought a more correct cinematic presentation would be that the main character would be used to live among the Jewish society, and then he comes back to the village to his brother's wedding, and as he want to go back to his normal life in Jerusalem, the village is closed, and it's more classic cinematic in the way that on the very first 10 minutes of the film, you understand the problem. You understand he's in between. He does not belong into any of the societies, and he's stuck, and he needs to. So a lot of these were basically decisions I made in order to get out the meaning and the feeling of the book in a correct cinematic way. I needed to have I like my films to have an iconic opening in a way. I mean, an iconic image of opening, because I like films to have that. Like when you see the first image, it's emblematic of the whole film, and it's very. And I had it with the band's visit, with the first shot of the band, just standing when the car passes. So I was trying to find this in the book and finding a way. So I had, the dove scene developed, and but I think that even though all those changes, the movie is very, very loyal to the essence of the feeling Sayed depicts in his book, which is the feeling of being stuck in between not being sure about who you are, what's your identity, and being forced to handle the world, even though you're kind of a person that would basically want to evade all those questions. But his heroes are always pushed to the place of facing the world that they try to run away from.
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, the idea of fidelity to a novel or source is a particularly outmoded and almost moralistic. I mean, the term fidelity. I think I saw somewhere you talked about how Sami was originally a journalist and so self-aware, and you wanted him in the film to become someone who's more of an ordinary guy who thinks he's above the fray because he's got this great job in Jerusalem and he even has a mistress. As a mark of, as you say, his kind of liminality, that he's not fully of, Israeli society, also a stranger in his own home. So I think those are very powerful changes. I'm curious about adaptation just as a matter of creative choice. And so that reveals a great deal. But I want to move on to talk about, one of the things you excel at in this film, there are many things you excel at, and the imagery of the dove and how it's carried through to the ending, where suddenly there's an opening in the wall, but they're still immobilized like the doves at the wedding scene are wonderfully conceived. But I did want to talk about this issue of masculinity. You excel, as in the band's visit, of creating these vignettes of interactions and small moments that reveal so much about the characters. And I think that the treatment of masculinity in the film is really interesting, because you have on the one hand the father who's saying, oh, back in the old days, we stormed the barricades and we, he's like full of fight, and he's seeing now, and what we see is a kind of resignation that, to fight against this. But whenever anyone asserts masculinity or agency, and particularly the men, it's really kind of cut down.
I agree. The film has a lot about relationships and masculinities. It's true that you have this, and I think this is very typical to situation of conflict, because men, once you are suppressed, okay, let's say as the Palestinian society is suppressed inside Israel, so the men are on one hand expected to be the resistant, because traditionally or in some way, and their masculinity is always threatened, because there's a high power there with guns and and in some way women are more free to resist, because putting it very simply and plainly, they will not be shot as fast as men, So, but if they use this, I don't know, privilege, I will not, but if they use this privilege, they in some ways have a conflict with the men, because then they are, how would I put it correctly? They are taking the role of the men. You can see in Mira's character, for example, that she's full of resistance, she's full of anger, but she cannot really express this anger because her man, in a way, is so much suppressed, and she cannot overtake him, or then because he would, his masculinity would be in greater danger. So. And as you said, I'm interested in all these human paradoxes, in all those spaces that sometimes are not talked about, but are always there inside the conflict, are always, there's so many small complexities in resistance, in suppression, and how they define themselves in the personal relationships, in what happens to the society, in what happens to the role class, the male, the classic male role, the classic woman role. That's part of what I think about, the gender tension in the film.
Yeah. And then that's also sort of part of the absurdity of the situation they find themselves. As if you've said, one of the effects of living in this village is that there are divisions within the village. You have the city, the village council. Well, you have these social strata, right? And Sami starts the film as royalty. He's got this cool job in Jerusalem. They want to know how another character's job measures up to his. Is he getting a good salary? And, you know, once he learns that he's fired, he's really taken down a peg. And in his own estimation, as well as that of people around him, though he doesn't really tell them what's happened to him. And Mira is very clear-eyed about this. She says, you'll be replaceable. They will just, you know, let go of you. You're not indispensable at all. But
that's of course something that makes him angry, because why don't you respect me for who I think I am? And, you know, and again, you know, as you said, you know, the problem just increases all the time. And yes, of course, I think what's very brilliant about Sayed's book is this thing of classes, how each class, when being closed, instinctively closes another class, you know, which is below them. And that's again, that's not something that is in the Palestinian society necessarily. I mean, you look at every society under any sort of, you know, closure, and you will immediately see this division. I mean, when COVID started here in Israel, and, you know, we had the first lockdowns and the disease was high, the first thing that happened on the news was starting to blame the Orthodox Jews here, for example, because, and I mean, the reason why COVID was spreading among the Orthodox Jews is very apparent, because they are of low income and they live in small spaces with a lot of people. You know, I forgot the word. So, but you could see that people didn't care about that. You know, immediately it was this other. Okay, oh no, they are the others. They are not as clean as us, not as good as us. All this, you could see it just happening. And it's amazing, like in Sayed's book, you know, the anger and the resistance is mostly never intended towards the suppressor, because the suppressor is very, very strong and there's a lot of fear. So what happens is that the aggression is turned towards your own lesser class, lesser casta, you know. So you have this everlasting circles of, you know, classes just suppressing down here.
Yes, it's all internalized and turned within. So you have the Fawis, the Palestinian laborers who come from the territories, and they become a scapegoat, a possible explanation for the siege. You've got the city council that votes to remove them, and maybe that'll end the siege. You have the gangster who, you know, tries to keep the taxi driver under control because he likes.
And they just enjoy the situation because they are like the militias, and in some way they are the collaborators of the establishment, because they have like an opportunity to rule the village, and now it's their time. And those things, you know, you can see it anywhere. You can see it in Jewish history, suppression. You can always see that once, you know, a society was closed, or, you know, it rapids or like accelerated the class system within the society.
Yes. So, you know, that's another dimension of it. So you know, and the taxi driver, you know, he's the one who, so you get Sami's father saying, we used to storm the barricades. And then Sami repeats this to his friend, the cab driver, who he looks down on. And then the cab driver takes him seriously. And so he's like, no, I was speaking metaphorically. And so he you know, he's a fascinating character because he's so ambivalent. He's so, I mean, I think part of this is his process of realizing that he's not above the fray, that he's part of this as well. And yet the great, the taxi driver is killed by throwing pebbles at the Israeli soldier, who turns around with his machine gun and kills him instantly. And that's what it takes to get people to mass and go down to the wall and protest at the end of the film. That's what it takes. And it's ironic that, Sami's younger brother, Aziz, he grabs the soldier's machine gun and plays with it while the soldier's asleep. And yet they are not. I mean, it's a good thing he took the machine gun, because the soldier might have woken up and shot them instantaneously. And at the same time, you're like, what are you doing? But everybody's looking for these moments of standing up, like Sami's son, his younger brother really likes it when he tells off the Israeli soldier after he's learned he's fired, because he's been very friendly. I know your brother.
Sorry, please go on. I'm sorry.
No. It's just all these examples. And then and then there are subtle examples of resistance, like the kite flying, which I understand is a form of resistance by a Palestinian political activist. So I don't know if you want to talk about that. I had some other thoughts.
No, I mean, but for me, at the end of the day, everyone are reciting, big words, big cliches, but everybody are acting at the end of the day on a very, very personal level, which is camouflaged with a lot of, big words. But most of the time, humanity is moving according to very personal, small instinct, which is everybody trying to kind of make a safe place for himself, and hoping that it will pass or will be better, or trying to take an advantage of the situation, or just being, I don't know, as the case of Aziz, just being totally horny all the time, and just have an affection for guns because he's just very, very horny. And in the end of the day, who walks alone to his death at the end of the night? The one that has just nothing to lose, and they walk, they do the act, which is not an act. It's just you don't have any other choice. So it's all pretty futile and sad. And also, if you take another perspective, it's the joke of humanity. It's the human comedy.
Yes, right. The futility of efforts. It's very kind of existential, waiting for Godot. I mean, it seems at the end, the taxi driver, like, he's dropped off the wedding portrait, he's dressed himself up. Why is he going to the checkpoint? What is this? Is this some kind of ritual? The other thing that's, and again, it is very, it's really sad, but you treat it with such compassion. The film combines a kind of detached observation of character behavior with a kind of love for these characters, a compassion, what you were just saying. Everybody does things for their own reasons. The great line by Jean Renoir, right, in Rules of the Game. Everybody has their reasons.
For sure. And I think that also cinematically, I'm very happy that it crossed over for you like that, because I'm trying always to find this cinematic moment which is just in between of being distant and being close. So you can have the ability to feel it, but yet also look at it from a side for a moment. So you have like both feelings sometimes at the same frame. You feel it, but you're still you have the ability to still think about it.
Yeah. And then just finishing this thread about masculinity. I'm sorry, I'm harping on
No, please.
But I mean, there's almost this comic moment where they take the grenade that Aziz has been given to throw at the Israelis, and they use it to blow up the gangster's car. and they are so exhilarated. It's comical. They come back and they're both ready to sleep with their wives. Finally, they've been able to do this, and it's just it's a marvelous moment because we want them to have normal sexual relations with their wives, but the thing that brings them to that moment is an assertion of authority, agency, and yet it's so kind of over the top. And again, internalized, as we were talking earlier, it's internalized. It's against the gangster, not against the Israeli guards. I'd like to ask you about the Israeli guard for a moment. There's so many things I want to ask you. He's kind of a buffoon. He plays this guitar with a peace symbol on it while he's guarding. He's falling asleep all the time. He's willing to bend the rules so that Sami and Aziz can call whoever they want to call. But yet, at this moment, at the end, he turns deadly. When the taxi driver is throwing pebbles at him. So it's also a kind of interesting portrayal of Israeli suppression and laying siege, right? Because he's like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why we're doing it. I can't tell you anything. Sure, come back. I'll let you use the phone. Great, you knew my brother. And then on a dime, it just turns. So arbitrary.
I don't know if it's, I wouldn't say arbitrary. I would say that my point of view on the soldier, and it's funny, it's one of those places where you have both Jewish audience and Palestinian audience seeing the film and getting in trouble is the character of the soldier. The Jews, the Israelis, they would say, I got like people telling me you are disgracing the army. I mean, who is this guy? He doesn't know what he's doing. And on the other hand, the Palestinians are like, why is he nice? He has to be, much more. Here is my point of view. My point of view is that most of the terrible things that goes in the world, and specifically in the Jewish Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is at the end of the day run by mediocre people. I mean, the people who are really to blame in situation are not the evil guys or the holy guys, which we all talk about. We talk about those, so he was a very bad soldier and he shouldn't have behaved like that, or he was such a good, loving person who, no, but most of the people are not like that and not like that. Most of the people, and I think you can take it even, to any kind of place in history where terrible things that happened, those machines work because of ordinary men who for some reason, which is same as the people in the village, tried to kind of manage the situation until it will finally pass. So when I write a soldier and I think, who is this soldier? I would say that the soldier is most of all like me. And that's what I remember, And as Sami tells him, if you remember, Sami tells the soldier, you are the worst of them all. And I believe in that because he's the worst of them all, because he could have done something. He could have known what's going on. But at the end of the day, what does he do? He's trying to be okay in the boundaries that he can, a little bit, smoothen the corners. But the old Chekhovian rule, the old dramatic Chekhovian rule, which is a gun, if you have a gun in the first act, it will shoot in the last act. This is not just a dramatic rule. This is a rule of life, because you don't use guns. Guns uses you, and that's also, I think, relevant for, America. When you have a gun and you allow yourself to be in a place with a gun, the gun, you will shoot it. That's the mechanism, the tragic mechanism of life. It's not about, how we are taught that, the good guy uses the gun, the bad guy uses the gun. No, it's bullshit. The gun uses the normal people.
Yes. I had just a couple of other questions I wanted to ask you. So on the positive side, I'm I was taken with your use of music in the film.
Yeah.
Sia's chandelier, for example. It seems like music. So the taxi driver plays it in a taxi. Sami grooves to it. They start nodding. To the beat. They start smiling. His son does. They pick up this old man who just wants to go somewhere. They play it, and it seems like the music. And then you have the scene where Mira is dancing to another song, right? I Cut Like a Buffalo.
Yeah, by Dead Weather.
And then Sami's mother looks on approvingly, and she starts. So it seems like music has a very particular function here. It draws people together, however ephemerally. It gives them a sense of community. And I wonder if you talk about how you came to think about using music.
Well, when I direct a film, I usually have I prepare this long playlist of songs that I feel capture in some way a certain essence of the film that I feel that needs to be there. And, I would listen to those songs between takes, or, while I'm shooting, I'm always when I'm not working, I would listen to the same songs again and again, because I feel I use them as a kind of a compass to where I'm heading. And in this film, while I was shooting it, I had this really long list of the cheesiest, sweetest, most beautiful pop songs ever. And of course, Sia's Chandelier was one of them. It's a great song. I'm a great believer in pop songs. I think that there is more sophisticated music in life. There may be more deep music, but only a pop song can really drag you out of hell, At a certain moment when you're broke or whatever, it's only a pop song that can really revive you. And that's what pop songs are, because and we talked about all those complexities and all those internal cages that people have, and all their internal traps. What can save you, from this hell, from this hell inside? What can save you in some way is a total nude display of emotion, like saying, okay, but that's how I feel. That's what's inside me. And that's what pop songs do. They go straight to the basic raw emotion and they save you. So in the same way in the film, those are the moments where, life transcends and people are comfortable with themselves for a moment, with being who they are, and stop, being, suppressed by their own dreams and by their own misconceptions,
Yes, it's a means of escape and uplift that's not available politically or socially. But it was just very, very striking how the music creates community. And Sami's mother's looking on. I mean, she already knows her son is sleeping with a Jewish woman in Jerusalem. And by the way, I was just really surprised she had no criticism of that. She did not express any judgment of that. She's kind of like, what's it like, right?
I feel women are in some way, because of their position, as we spoke before, but I don't know, men are so obsessed with ideologies, and they would always, it's almost only men that in history told you what you're supposed to die for. And I don't remember any woman really explaining why you should die for something. So they tend more in some way to say, why should you live for something, And you can always see that sometimes even in religious families, you can see that, men or the fathers tends to be so occupied with, his religion and what is good. And, even in the Jewish families, in Orthodox families, the mother would be the one to say, okay, so it's not yet, Shabbat is not yet out, but, open the air condition because we are all cold now. It may be surprising in the film, but I think it's one of those moments that may surprise you, but a good surprise is the kind of surprise that at first would surprise you, and then you would say, but actually, yes, that's how women are, and that's how mothers are. And so it's not the kind of surprise that you say, oh, that cannot be. It's a kind of surprise that, thinking about it, I think for a second you would say, actually, it's quite logical.
Yes. No, but it's wonderful. It's just a great moment. I could talk at least another half hour with you about the film and various details. You've accomplished such an important thing and this is what we value at our festival, is films that, give us a sense of experience. It opens our boundaries. It lets us see in this very Kafkaesque, absurd, but melancholy way what the lives of Palestinians, whether they live in Israel or not, is like. And of course, there is a huge difference. But we're just so grateful to you for this film, for opening our eyes and letting us experience in a subtle way. You never tell us what to think. You show what you show and you leave it to us. And that is just an incredible achievement. So I want to thank you for the film. Thank you for letting it be shown with our festival. Thank you for talking with me. And I want to thank everyone who attended our conversation. And I guess I'll just end by saying we look forward to your next project, whatever it is.
Thank you so much. I just have the opportunity to say thank you myself. I want to thank you, Matthew, for having this interview with me, and really to thanks all the viewers at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival for watching the film, and I hope they got something out of this conversation.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Mine too.